Breaking news out of Alberta. One child is dead and 14 others have been transported to hospital following an incident on the Stoney First Nation. It's about 50 kilometers west of Calgary. Health officials say the children are suffering from medical symptoms, not trauma, but really it's still a mystery. The CBC's Sarah Galashan is tracking the latest. Sarah, what can you tell us?
Well, Carol, a couple of things new this hour to talk to you about. Alberta Health Services actually has tweeted out that they are treating these young patients for what they're describing as influenza-like symptoms. So they're not saying this is necessarily the flu, but likely some kind of a respiratory problem, an illness. Also, we have new pictures into the newsroom from the scene. Our Calgary shooters have made their way out there. And what we're seeing from these pictures, you can tell large snow banks. This is an area that is relatively remote. It is outside, certainly, of the city of Calgary, located in the foothills along the route you would take if you were traveling toward Banff. That's where emergency responders were called to the scene. It's where they found two young children in medical distress. The 911 calls came in around 11:45 in the morning. There's no evidence at this point to indicate just how long either of these children might have been ill, but emergency officials telling the media that by the time the ambulance arrived, these two children were easily identifiable, as one was so ill that that child had to be immediately transported to Children's Hospital in Calgary. The other, sadly, was pronounced dead on the scene. And as the paramedics were inside this single residence, they realized that there were a number of other children who also were requiring treatment. As they were there on scene, that they were getting progressively more sick. And so in total, 12 other children and a young adult, a young male adult, had to be taken to hospital. And this is what we heard about that.
Many of the patients that were transported are demonstratively very unstable condition, in very stable condition, I should say. However, one of the first patients that was transported, one of the younger patients, was unfortunately in very serious condition. In many cases, the patients were stable enough as well to be transported in groups of 3 or 4 groups at a time in an ambulance.
All right, one child dead, 14 suffering from these flu-like symptoms. What do we know about these children?
Well, we know basically the rough ages here. We're talking about children between the ages of 4 months to 12 years of age, as well a young adult, a male in his late teens. There appears to be some kind of a family relationship, according to that spokesperson we just heard from, although it's unclear just exactly how all of these children are related to, and if in fact this is a single family that we're looking at or not. They couldn't actually give us those details. RCMP, though, as you can see from the pictures, they are on the scene. We understand they are investigating, but very important to note here that there's no concerns of trauma or violence in this case as well. We heard early on that they didn't believe that this was a case of carbon monoxide poisoning or of any other noxious substance that might have been in the air in that home. What we can tell you is the reports this hour, coming from a tweet from Alberta Health Services, is that the patients that have been transported to Children's Hospital in Calgary are being treated for what they're calling influenza-like symptoms. Carol? Yeah,
and one more thing to add to this. Media reports tonight the Ministry of Indigenous Services has now reached out to Stoney First Nation. We're also reading through media reports that the Minister of Indigenous Services, Jane Philpott, has now been made aware of this incident.